Coming up next. Stay tuned to learn more about the state of blockchain education at major universities all around the world. Reimagine 2020.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reimagine 2020. I'm your host, Adam, with two very special guests today. Appreciate all of you tuning in. For everyone watching, the blockchain space spans across a wide variety of industries, verticals, public sectors, environmental concerns and challenges, and the list goes on. But the only thing more important than blockchain and all of its use cases is its regulatory landscapes and restrictions that we're all need to be a part of. So whether setting up shop in the U.S. or in another country, the laws do vary. All of you entrepreneurs and startup founders watching right now always need to consider the legalities that come with it, the white areas, the black areas, the gray areas. This goes on for all types of businesses that you're going to start. But with blockchain, we touch on ethical standards, securities, privacies, and so forth. So you always need to be ready. So right now, it's my pleasure to have a discussion with two very special people that I know. I'll go ahead and kick it over to Professor, if you want to introduce yourself and what you do and how you got involved.
Sure. My name is Professor Michele Neitz. I am a law professor at Golden Gate University School of Law in San Francisco. I am the first professor this year to teach blockchain law in San Francisco, in the city proper. And it was a really exciting debut course in which law students, some of whom are not just don't know technology, but are frankly a little bit afraid of technology, came in the room and really were able to get a good understanding of what blockchain technology is and the legal and regulatory challenges around it. I have a funny story for how I got into this, actually. So my brother is a database architect, and at Christmas dinner in 2017, he told us he was starting this company related to blockchain. And we had no one at the table knew what he was talking about, which is not that unusual when my brother is talking about his job, right? But he drew it on a napkin for us. And he drew out what a blockchain was at Christmas dinner. And I thought, that's really cool. Like, I wonder what the laws are around that. In 2017, they weren't much, right? And I thought, I'd love to teach a class on this, but there was literally nothing to teach for the most part, right? There was a lot of theory and a lot of proposals. A few states had passed some things, but it wasn't at all anything I could put into a class. And so fast forward, I'm an ethics expert. I am an implicit bias expert. And I started considering how can we put ethics and blockchain together? And that's what led me to start researching this and really in full in early 2019 and publish a couple blog posts and articles examining ethics and blockchain, which led me to the California Blockchain Working Group, where I'm helping the working group to advise the California legislature on what should the regulatory landscape look like in California when it comes to blockchain.
Great, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Annie, go ahead and give your introduction and a little background about yourself and what you do.
Great. So I am co-founder of, it's a new ecosystem that we call Yunity, and we're an ecosystem that drives disruption across three pillars. One is we're an advisory group. Two, we're a new incubator and builder creator lab. And three is a venture group. And we are a number of companies that are merging together with some just incredible renowned innovators across industries and across technologies. We have experts that are Singularity University faculty, as well as deep researchers and just profound industry leaders. And, my background, I've worked with a number of different technologies that we call exponentials. And these are technologies that are rapidly growing. And while the cost is decreasing every year and a half. And so I kind of sit on the convergence of technologies, things like AI, blockchain, mixed reality, robotics, how these all converge. I'm just kind of wired that way, and I've been involved in a number of exponential technologies for most of my career since I was in college. and how I got involved with blockchain. I think back, it was actually 2013 when I was first kind of really hearing about it. And these were with investors because, in my network, I have a number of crazy, amazing investors, and started really taking it seriously, coming into 2014. And two of my partners have been very deeply involved in the blockchain industry, which is where I started getting involved more as a business strategic advisor, and really saying, okay, what can be done in real terms? Not just talking about the cool tech and all that could happen, but how we can take these concepts and really move forward and build it into cohesive businesses. So we've been involved with a number of projects and very successful blockchain companies in gaming, anywhere from gaming to energy to real estate. And my big passion, and this is part of what we do at Yunity, is we align and we educate and we inspire to a triple bottom line business model, which is people, planet, and profit. We don't call it out too much, but for us, this is the new generation of how business should be done and how consumers want to see businesses built. And that's where I really get excited about blockchain and how that can really move the envelope.
Great. Thank you for that background, both of you. First of all, thank you both for joining today and being part of Reimagine 2020. I think, the perspectives we have from both of you today will really give some insight into our viewers, and watchers right now all over the world. The overarching goal of our conference was to bring you reality, bright minds in the crypto space that are adding value to ways that we might do business in the future. And the whole point of this discussion is really to separate the noise from the facts. And so I'm very fortunate to have both of you here today. So as I mentioned, both of you come from different backgrounds, so your perspectives will be different, which is ideal for our viewers right now all over the world that can, understand like what the hell is going on in blockchain. So I'm going to kick off this pretty straightforward question, but it's kind of in depth, to each of you. What is blockchain? What does blockchain mean to you? And again, not from a technical standpoint, but what are the possibilities out there that blockchain brings? I think our viewers might be going down this rabbit hole at the moment. And so, I want to give them some perspective on everybody's, what they think blockchain is. And so maybe I'll start it off with you, Professor Neitz.
Sure. The first word that came in my head when you asked that question was changing. Blockchain is changing. It's evolving. It is always changing. And frankly, as a lawyer who's been in academia for 15 years almost, that makes it very exciting for me because it's changing so quickly and evolving at such a deep level that we don't know how to regulate it, right? And I teach laws that were written 100 years ago, it's really fun to teach an area where we don't have a whole lot of laws around this yet. And so the way I encapsulate blockchain in my head is that it's a innovative, exciting technology that can have a great deal of impact, and that can be both positive and negative. And unfortunately, the negative impacts were really what hit the headlines first, right? So, Silk Road and money laundering and that kind of stuff is what a lot of people had first heard about it. And so there's been a bit of a PR issue, a PR shift that needed to happen in order for regulators in the federal Congress and state legislators to really start thinking about this as something that could help our state and help our citizens. And that's the shift I think we're seeing now. And frankly, with the pandemic, I think we're seeing it happen much faster. There are two members of Congress who in the last month have written bills that will include blockchain in pandemic relief. And so I think that's a pretty exciting moment, right? That it's coming to the fore during this time of crisis.
Is that pretty public?
Changing.
Is that pretty public?
Oh yeah, I could actually give you links to what those are. One of them relates to it's called the ACT, the ABC Act, and it was drafted to try to provide cash relief to Americans and to residents of the United States with a debit card, like literally mailing a debit card. But in the draft bill is the provision that we hope that we could build a blockchain related infrastructure that could eventually deliver. We'd have to use a digital dollar, obviously, that could eventually deliver those types of payments. And so it's exciting. That's what I would say. That I don't know which bills will pass. That also makes it kind of fun, right? Like I have my students studying federal legislative proposals that may not become law. But that I think is it for someone in law school, especially, and even for attorneys who are practicing, that means you got to stay on your toes. You got to know what's going on. And that is pretty exciting.
Nice. Thank you for that. Yourself, like, what does blockchain mean to you? You come from industry. You have an extensive, background and knowledge about the space. What excites you, or not excites you, but yeah, what does blockchain mean to you?
Yeah, what I always say is, I try and just throw out the technology and the buzzwords and everything. And, when I'm talking about blockchain, for me, it is a foundational tool. It is a business foundation that can help drive and enable so much of what current technologies are not able to enable, and drive forth business models, across multiple industries. And, and where I get excited about blockchain is that, we all talk about, okay, this is a decentralized, distributed, unassailable technology. And, and so I just try and dumb that down and say, this is basically, it's a digital record, right? It is a foundational platform that provides a digital record that's unassailable. It's amazingly secure. It's really easy to access, and it's accessible for the public, different corporations, as well as NGOs. And, and so for me, what excites me the most with blockchain is the enablement, as well as convergence, right? Converging different technologies to be able to enable what we can't see today. And we'll probably get a lot more into it, but where I get excited, I tell the story that, lots of times we talk about women going to bars, and, you're walking up to a stranger and you're giving them your ID, where you're giving them all kinds of information that you don't want with someone, half the time it's a shady guy that might follow you, or, or whatever. And blockchain is this is just one use case where, in the future, no one has to know who I am, where I live, or any of my personal details. All they need to know is I'm 21, I'm able to go into this bar, and that's verified beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's it. So I always like to use that as one use case, and there are innumerable use cases for blockchain.
Great. No, thank you for that perspective. I think that makes sense. And what I want to do with this conversation as we move forward, and to put it into the theme, I think, is more perspectives. This theme is more perspectives. And I want to take this on a little journey, right? So we just kind of asked to you, what is blockchain? And I think the next step would be education. And both of you, again, will have different views, or maybe similar views. But where are we in terms of actually education? And I'll start with you, Professor, as far as what's the sentiment? Obviously, a lot of universities are way further along and have clubs, are deeply ingrained as far as labs and research. And then there's the other spectrum, end of the spectrum, where they don't have any kind of blockchain. So that's no problem. I think it's come around. But maybe from your school, because I've talked to you and your team, it just seems like there's so much interest in the whole team wants to move forward with blockchain and incorporating that. Can you give the viewers and audience, like, what kind of insight you can share with us on how that looks, and how you guys plan to incorporate blockchain, and is it important?
Great question. So I'm in a law school that also has a business school, accounting, tax, finance, within the university. And I can tell you what I'm motivated by, and that is helping my law students to find jobs, right? It's a really critical thing when you go to law school you want to have a job before you graduate if possible. And when I started moving around about 1.5 years ago in this space, I kept hearing over and over, I haven't met, a lot of lawyers that really understand this. Gosh, I wish, we need to have more lawyers that understand what this is, especially as regulations are being drafted so quickly and rushed, and we need lawyers that can help to advise on that. So, it was an easy line to draw that we should be teaching this, right? If they need lawyers in this space, I can help with that. I just have to learn the technology myself, and I have to figure out what angles are going to be critical for law students to know. And that's what I developed with my syllabus, which there'll be different iterations of the class as the technology develops. And so I do think from an education perspective, one of the things that's hard is for folks who are not in an obvious institution where blockchain should exist. Like if you're at MIT, which has been involved in blockchain, I mean, they've been doing diplomas on a blockchain since 2017 and certificates since 2015. Like that's an obvious university that's gonna have a blockchain program, right? I think it's less obvious for folks who may not be, for universities that may not be in, the tech meccas, who might be in more rural areas where there's not a huge tech industry and the jobs are not obviously as soon as you walk out the door. And also for disciplines that are not accustomed. So medicine is a great example, right? I mean, the healthcare industry is going to be transformed by blockchain. Doctors need to understand what it is. At law, I have found like the amount of lawyers who are kind of scared off by technology. I mean, if you're really good at technology and math, you probably didn't go to law school, right? So the amount of lawyers that need to understand this, it's just about kind of bringing people on board. Business schools, like business folks are going to need to know how blockchain operates and how it's going to transform their industries. And I think we're on the cutting edge of this. I think that the pandemic's going to accelerate things as people start to see blockchain use in the news much more often. And as federal regulators and Congress people start to get excited about the idea. So I think that's the challenge, is how can you relate blockchain technology to every discipline within an institution and to institutions that are not kind of the obvious choices for a blockchain technology program.
No, I appreciate that. And Annie, I'll kind of let you chime in a sec, but I mentioned earlier, as far as we have a really large university program where we have, 80 plus schools. And we thought 2 years ago, 3 years ago, this was an area of an opportunity. MouseBelt invests and helps startups. And then we have a development team. So we're building projects and internal and external projects and products. And we decided, we got to extend this out, right? And so we started reaching out to schools and that kind of blew up and it's been successful. It's a lot of work. It took quite some time to get where we are now. And we still have a lofty goals to reach. But I was just kind of thinking, and I think, Annie, you had another aspect of kind of blockchain in education where originally I thought maybe, do you just need YouTube, GitHub, and a computer science degree? I mean, we've had blockchain. The components of blockchain, right, have been around for decades. As you mentioned, you've said it a couple times as far as buzzwords, right? Blockchain's been around, but it's kind of picked up maybe in the last 10, since Bitcoin came out in 2008. And here we are with applications, and there's still no courses. Some schools like MIT, maybe Berkeley, Duke,
Stanford.
They have it. But what's your take on it?
Well, for me, and we were kind of joking around. What do you really need? And I mean, in today's world, you could learn just about anything from the internet, right? So if you want to learn something, you're going to learn it. And I would say blockchain's it's fairly complicated. And so what I like to say is decide what lane you want to play in. To me, I bring it back to this is an enabler, and it's an enabler across all industries. To look at this as any technology, any enabler. I don't really even just view it as a technology because it spans a number of different areas. Look at this as a business enabler and then ask, in what way do I want to play in this industry? Not everyone's ever going to be a developer. You don't need to know the bits and bytes of blockchain, how that's put together. That's where I love what MouseBelt's doing. Some of what we see with a number of different education initiatives, around universities. I would like to see blockchain as in working workshops, not just in universities, but we're looking right now at 36 million people that have lost their jobs. And there are a good number of those people that would really benefit from levels of education across, blockchain or other exponential technologies where they can really apply, what do I do? What do I do in the real world in my industry? And how can I take these concepts, team up with other developers or other groups and be able to really rapidly disrupt or move the industry I'm in forward. And I agree with you, Professor, that, you know, what we see over and over again, you know, even in large enterprises, is that there's this tiptoeing. There's a lot of interest. There are many projects that or initiatives that will happen, but there's also been a tiptoeing of, okay, I don't know which one to choose. This is very complicated. You know, what's driving the need for this? And so that's where we come back to, you know, get back to the business enablers. And from an education standpoint, I think every student, anyone that wants to be in this industry, looking at the fundamentals and understanding how to apply those fundamentals with the technology, I think that's critical. An example I can give is a couple of our founders at Unity were instrumental in helping to pass the Washington State, it's the historic blockchain law. And we had to, you're basically talking, you know, at one point, we know the bill was just kind of stuck. And the reason why is that so many people were talking about the bits and bytes of blockchain, and you're talking to people who are legislators who are experienced in their area, but they come from an analog background. Mm-hmm. So we had to really take baby steps to explain what is a distributed ledger. We have legal terminology around this and how to apply that. And once they understood that, instead of thinking, oh, there's a lot of fraud around cryptocurrency, you know, but really bring it back to what are the fundamentals of blockchain as a business enabler. Then they got it, and they rapidly passed the law. And so these are the types of things when I think about education and educating people around blockchain. I think there really also has to be, you know, those key components about how does this apply to me and where can I dance in this industry.
Yeah, you bring up a few good points, and Professor, I'll get your maybe some follow-on thoughts on that. You brought up a few good points. I think the space, going back to education and what you just mentioned on cryptocurrencies, we've gone forward, we've gone backwards, we've gone forward as far as, you know, launching up. And we saw this, you know, the last few years, and that's why we formed MouseBelt, really, was to be more hands-on, right? We saw the bear market coming, and this industry raised billions of dollars, and we had no code, you know, no products, no MVPs. And, you know, I think our mindset was just ahead of ourselves. And so we tried to scale that back. And I think, Professor, we just quickly chatted about maybe this hybrid approach of education, right? Courses and degrees in blockchain and the skill set to get them prepared. And Annie just touched on it too, as far as workshops. And we were just talking about the state, right? Kind of putting a program together. And maybe you can kind of help formalize it for the viewers, but I don't want to butcher it too much, but we were just talking about kind of, you know, what else can we do and collaborate amongst these working groups, whether it's industry, academia, you know, the state, you know, public officials. Can you give some insight on that, on programs that you're thinking we could potentially do in the future? Maybe not now because of the COVID, but, you know, when the time's right.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, so the California Blockchain Working Group has 20 members, and we were appointed by the legislature, and there were 3 lawyers on the committee, and we were vetted by the Judicial Council to get on the committee. And so Camille Crittenden is our chair at UC Berkeley, and because we are a really diverse group in terms of experience and what we bring to the table. And so that's been really fun to kind of see the lawyers wrestling with the technologists. You know, it's been a lot of fun, actually. I've learned a great deal from being on it. So what we're trying to do is figure out which use cases are best for California to move forward in legislation. We're fortunate in that in California, our Senate Majority Leader Hertzberg and the Assembly Majority Leader Ian Calderon, they are the ones who kind of pushed forward on getting the blockchain working group together. And I think for states, there's a real race going on right now between the states. Frankly, Wyoming is winning it. And New York and California are not right now. And so we are very aware of this. And, you know, part of the tension in legislation is figuring out how can we attract business to the state while still protecting the consumers? You know, that's that tension that will always exist when there's a new technology, whether it's railroads or blockchain, right? But what I'm really hoping is that California will lead the way on community education. I think that you made a great point, Ani, about the amount of folks who are going to be looking to transition into a new industry in this economy, and blockchain could support that, you know, the education and training of a lot of these people. In my head, and now right now it only lives in my head, if we had some sort of a division of state government that was really going to focus on developing blockchain technology in the state, that could act as a liaison between the industry and the government, so that if you're an industry player, you have someone you know that you can call in Sacramento that will be able to help. And conversely, then you would have legislators having someone that they could call to explain the technology to them if needed. That would be ideal, right? A division of department of people would be even better. But failing that in this economy, I do think there's about to be a real shift toward community education. And I think it can be led by the state, and that's what I'm advocating for. I really hope that the state will take advantage of that. We've had a lot of debates on the working group about certificates. Should we require certificates to be a blockchain engineer in California? My own personal opinion, not speaking for the working group, is that certificates tend to favor the wealthy and the educated who know how to get them. I think keeping it as an open industry is probably a better way to go to start. But I think if we're going to be moving legislative efforts in the direction of blockchain, we need to educate our citizens about what it is. That's why MouseBelt's very creative approach of connecting education and industry is a really strong way to go, I think, with that. But it's going to take a whole host of, I mean, we need we need a new deal to do this, right?
No, great. No, thank you for those the insights there. We just touched on education, what that looks like, how do we integrate that? How do we incorporate that? And obviously we all think it's important one way or another. So thank you for the insight. And I kind of want to move along here and go along kind of this journey. And I think it kind of now leads into maybe Professor Neitz's realm, but Annie, you probably have perspective coming from industry as well on regulation and kind of, what are the emerging trends? And Professor, maybe I'll let you kick it off on, you just said Wyoming's leading the way. Some of the other states are maybe, lagging a little bit. What's the sentiment there? And we'll kind of keep it within California on, I guess, really putting down regulation, like laws and all that. Is there a rush? Is everybody just taking time? Are we still in that? Obviously, we're in that education period. So maybe once we completely understand, as Annie mentioned on, even on the enterprise side, they still need to learn. We've had these conversations too, and they love it, but they just don't know how to use it, right? So, Professor, what's going on with the state and the emerging trends as far as cryptocurrency regulations or blockchain regulation?
Sure. So first, before I say anything else, I want your viewers to know that on Friday, May 22nd, we're having a blockchain working group entirely via Zoom, and we're going to be going over the final draft, a draft, I should say, not the final. We're going to be going over the draft and potentially voting on recommendations to the legislature. So if you want to be involved in this in California, you can log into Zoom, submit comments. You can speak to the working group because we always have time for public comments, and it's available if you just Google California Blockchain Working Group, May 22nd, it will pull up the agenda. And so I would encourage your viewers who want to be involved in the regulatory side to take a look at that. Here's what I think. We are a huge state in California. We can't be Wyoming, right? We can't be that nimble. We have a lot of citizens here, a lot of residents here. We have a lot of constituencies with different needs in California. And so I don't think we're going to be able to be as nimble as Wyoming has been. That being said, though, we also have a very talented workforce here in California. We have a lot to offer employers who would want to incorporate in California. And so, as I said earlier, that tension, we've talked a lot about it. How do we protect consumers while making sure that regulation is still happening? Where I think we're headed, and I'll find out more, frankly, on Friday, a week from tomorrow, or Friday the 22nd, when the regulatory committee reports back to us. They're wrestling with, should we take the permissive approach that Wyoming has taken, or should we take the restrictive approach that New York has taken, for example, with the BIT license. I think we need to be in the middle. That was my opinion that I submitted, that we can't be as nimble as Wyoming, but we're also an innovative state. We shouldn't be as restrictive as New York. And so we'll see where that lands us. I think you're going to see a report that summarizes use cases around supply chains. We're going to have a state definition of blockchain. I drafted the voting section in which we're hopefully not going to have blockchain voting in 2020 in California, because I think the security risks that we've learned about are just too great for that right now. So we're kind of fleshing out what the use cases are that the state could focus on. We were directed to look for low-hanging fruit, something that could pass as early as this summer, that could be a useful pilot project to show the state how blockchain technology would work in California, and then move forward. So the answer is, I will know so much more in a month than I know right now about the way that California is going.
And who are these, the team members that go through, write the bills and the legislature and all these proposals? Are they talking to industry? Like, is there a gap there? Is it collaborative effort? Is everybody putting their thoughts in, or is it kind of, the state trying to understand from a bird's eye view or like an outside perspective? Do they tap into, Berkeley's and Stanford's and MIT's, or is the state on its own?
Well, the point of the working group was to try to bring in industry players, right? So they do have, folks from an attorney from Workday, Jason Albert, is on it. Brian Bellendorf is on it. David Tenenhouse. Some of the sort of big shot names in the industry are on the working group with us. There have also been folks who have come to every meeting, who are interested and want to make sure that their voice is heard. There's a public survey that you could do online, and we do receive those comments and read them. And so, but I will say this, I mean, I'm not sure how many folks watching this knew about the California Blockchain Working Group and knew that we were having these public meetings. And that, I think, is something that we need to work on if the working group continues. I try to send blast emails out and, retweet whenever I can and put out what's going on out there. And I've invited my students have come to the meetings. But I do think that, I think it's hard for folks to be focused on like your startup in your industry, but also keeping an eye on what's happening with legislation. Like that's a lot to ask of entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah. So is the state really excited then?
We are excited, and I will say this. You asked if we're not in a rush. We are in a rush. Like they already have a placeholder bill in the legislative calendar, the schedule of bills, because they want to put something in it related to blockchain and get it passed. And so we're eager to do this. And I think I'm hopeful that because it's been such a deliberative effort that it's going to be able to incorporate multiple perspectives.
Great. And Annie, on your side, regulation, compliance, a lot of legal GCs involved, right? It's what, maybe from the startup perspective or even the enterprise front, do you see is there any holdup or concerns? Obviously, if you're doing an STO and raising funds, there's some concerns and challenges. But aside from that, or maybe you can include that, like what do you see from industry and these government officials trying to, provide a legal framework for everybody to operate in? And right now, it's gotten better, right? Like I think ICO craze was nuts. And then, everybody scaled it back and now we're, working it out. How has it affected, or what do you see from industry to regulation compliance? You just mentioned that Washington State, passed some things. How has it affected business, or, what is it? Does it stunt, growth and development, or it hasn't really affected it too much?
Yeah, I would say quite the opposite. I think that we're in a phase where I would say blockchain's kind of grown up, and there, because there's always been this, and I think there always will be, I hope, kind of a wild west innovation, push the envelope, because that's what we need. And so I love that that California is actually saying, okay, we need to understand who we are as innovators. I mean, UC Berkeley is my alma mater. So, so understanding that you want to have regulation, I believe, to provide a level of legitimacy for those enterprises, for those governments to adopt. So for us, especially looking at Washington State and, some of our team being involved, as industry experts involved in helping to walk what that legislation looked like, there was this balanced approach, where it was, how can we ensure that we're not going to be cutting ourselves off at the knees, but really providing more, I believe it's more education. It's more of an understanding, and then letting the experts from a legal perspective be able to draw that out. So it's kind of working hand in hand. As far as industry goes, and whether regulation helps or hurts, I mean, it just depends on who you're talking to. I've worked in biotech, and and in industries like media and entertainment, where you always want to push the envelope in different ways. But at the end of the day, if we're looking at voting systems, smart cities, there's an initiative I'm working on. I just joined the X Prize Pandemic Alliance as an ambassador. And when we look at the pandemic and what blockchain solutions could have enabled already, and some of what we're working on when we look at the supply chain challenges, I mean, that has been horrendous. And that's why our team jumped in, because we already drive really amazing blockchain driven supply chain solutions already with the biggest coffee producers in the world, as well as China rice. Being able to provide those real world examples and then be able to take that into a government infrastructure. And what we're seeing is, even at the federal government level, there already are bids to be able to drive, we were asked to bid, part of our team was asked to bid on blockchain enabled solutions around supply chain, as well as bringing in AI to provide some level of insight. So I think that moving forward, no matter what the regulation or how it's constructed, I think we will definitely be seeing more and more blockchain, not less. And this being an enablement. I think more importantly, it's really about kind of that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a stamp of approval that, yes, we accept this technology, now go run with it. And, in a smart way. That's our perspective of it.
No, totally. And I think it all makes sense. And what I'm understanding, to kind of put this out for the viewers and our audience, is that regulators have an eye on it, obviously, for quite some time. And they're very proactive in a way, maybe a little bit slower, maybe a little bit faster in certain areas, but the discussions are being had. Certain states are further along than others, but we're moving in the right direction. And even from industry side, obviously that helps us manage, risk and investments that we take on, and then pushing the envelope on the development side, right, gives us some regulatory guidance. So thank you both for providing those perspectives, which kind of leads into, we just talked about what is blockchain, right, to us three, and then education, learning. It's obviously continuing. We need this moving forward, and it seems like there's programs going to come up. A lot of the universities are picking it up. We just need to keep pushing that and maintain. And then that kind of leads into regulatory, right? If you're a startup, if you're legislation, on the investment side, it's all coming together, which kind of leads now to my kind of final topic, which would be adoption. And where are we? Like, are you, what inning are we in? Maybe I'll start off with you, Annie. We've been kind of, again, blockchain is the buzzword. The components of blockchain have been around for decades, and now it's all snowballing. Maybe everything is coming together. And adoption, you have a wide range of expertise where blockchain is just the infrastructure for maybe the AI, the machine learning, robots, and token usage amongst cars. I don't know. You probably have a better perspective, but give some insight into adoption. Like, where do you think we are? Are we in a good place? And are we trending in the right direction from what you see, right? From an investment standpoint, you're talking enterprises, it's kind of all coming together. What are your thoughts on adoption and where we're at it? How blockchain really plays into the future?
I love that question, Adam, because I still feel like we're still in like the third inning. We got past some of the stuff where everyone's diving in, investing in. There's a bubble, kind of that trough of discontent, with regulators coming in and saying what is going on. To now, really we're kind of like I said. I mean, maybe we haven't grown up completely yet. We're teenagers in the adolescent scale, but what's exciting is that it is being adopted across industries. I think it's been slower than we'd wanted in some ways on the enterprise level, but there is still tremendous investment that is going into these deep infrastructure projects. And and where this heads, I think the key, there's some things, we as experts, as well as, we talk about the convergence of technologies. I think we're still in the early stages. I really believe, we're bullish on interoperability. I think that is key. It is really where I think the industry will kind of get to that next level phase where blockchains recognize each other. We have to have it. We need it. Enterprises are talking about this as well. The other piece, I think, really some of what we're already seeing adopted is in industries that you normally wouldn't see it. I mean, we're talking to major gaming operators around, that run massive casinos, that we're talking about blockchain initiatives and how this can transform. And that is a highly regulated industry. We've had a lot of fun in gaming, media, and entertainment. One of our startups with a past company, I mean, they're in the Samsung wallet, a partnership with Microsoft. I mean, you're going to start seeing more and more traditional companies that are adopting different initiatives. And then when I think about government and where this is heading, we've already been talking about it and touching on it. I think the sky's the limit. I still get very excited when I think about smart cities. We have a robotics company, for example. It's a really cool play in telepresence. You're going to hear a lot more about them. They're doing things on the moon and space with NASA, but also, these were gamers that have expertise in both areas, and they've already had a ton of gamers that are racing drones, where there is a lot of regulation that's popping up around it. And where we can utilize blockchain, we haven't yet, but this is where we're saying, okay, where can blockchain provide help, from autonomous vehicles all the way to, all kinds of robots that are exploding in this next decade, to smart cities, where we actually have good, easy voting for citizens, and healthcare. I mean, there's massive spend and investment in healthcare blockchain initiatives over all other industries. So I don't know if people know that, but there's major spend there. We have an energy company, publicly traded energy company, that has a new startup where we are helping to bridge the gap from fossil fuels to clean energy and clean tech, which is really exciting. Blockchain being the underpinning of this, and a whole lot more. So I still feel like I said we're kind of growing up. I think third inning, maybe I'm a little early, maybe we're a little past the third inning, but I feel like we're really starting to pick up momentum, and now it's really going to be education, interoperability, strength around identity. There's tons of really exciting identity solutions that could transform our world. And so that's my take on it.
No, that's great. And Professor, I'll get to you shortly. Just real quick, I know we're kind of running up on time in a little bit, but as far as blockchains go, like the technology, where are we in the game there? Is it feasible, like, to use what we have, Ethereum, Sederas, I don't know, icons of the world, hyperledgers, Stellar. What do you think of the tech that plays into our future? Obviously, things are going to get better. Are we in a good spot? We're talking about sharding and all of this crazy crazy technical talk, and I don't want to get too much into that, but from your perspective, like, how does that look as far as technology goes, and bridging the gaps of, like you said, fossil fuels? And does a tech allow you to kind of bring that to fruition, like these thoughts and ideas? Is a tech there to help support that?
I think absolutely today, the technology is there to take us to a certain level. I mean, when we think about where we could be, digital cities, digital twinning, I think this is where it's absolute convergence between blockchain layer with AI, with mixed reality. I mean, the smartphone in a few years, that's changing, right before our eyes. We already know there's big plays, using augmented reality, contacts, and glasses will replace our smartphones, and so that's where I think the need for blockchain and being able to take that up a level of robustness. We already know there's some initiatives that are in play. These are nonprofit initiatives. So we'll see, and this is, I think, part of where you're seeing some in the enterprise. They've been waiting, but there is massive investment because the technology is good enough right now to invest and move forward. But I think you're going to see convergence of the tech as a platform, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. No, totally. I think what you're saying is the technology right now works for right now, and obviously it's going to get better. And then interoperability is like a major component to all of this coming together. And I think there's a lot of teams working on that. Osmos and I don't know, LTO network, like a bunch of our partners. Professor, do you have any insight on kind of adoption from your perspective? Are we there yet? It's kind of weird when I think of adoption. Is it retail adoption? Is it government adoption? Is it enterprise adoption? And from our conversations, Annie's been working with her clients and all the discussions that I've had. I mean, almost every Fortune 100 company has touched on blockchain. So I'm kind of thinking this is what leads the way, right? It hasn't been fully adopted, but this is kicking it into gear to kind of push, adoption maybe on the consumer front, from a legal, from a state standpoint of, obviously their main concern is the consumer. So, all of the rules will be, around the consumer. We need to kind of fit in that. But yeah, what's adoption to you and kind of where we're at in 2020?
Yeah, I feel like I'll know we're over the hump when I am able to tell people I'm teaching a class called blockchain law, and they don't say, "You're teaching Bitcoin in a law school?" Because when that happens, then I'll know, right, that people understand what blockchain is. And I think, what I think from a lawyer's perspective, we will have adoption from a legal standpoint when we have legal certainty, which we are lacking right now, right? I mean, I've had people approach me as a member of the California Blockchain Working Group and say, please, let's make sure we have some sort of uniformity, right? I mean, if New York and California could come up with a similar structure, that would really help folks who are trying to build companies in either one of those states and go national with them, right? And so, but I think we're a ways away from that, at least a number of years away from having that legal certainty. What will be interesting will be to see how much the states continue to compete against each other. States compete against each other all the time, not just in blockchain, right? Or whether the federal government's going to try to come and do an overlay. I honestly think that ship may have already sailed. I think states are developing their own blockchain identities. I don't think the feds are going to be able to eliminate that. So yeah, I think when a lawyer is able to tell a client, if you go to this state, here's what will happen, that's going to be a point that's going to really speed adoption, because then there will be that certainty for investors and for entrepreneurs to know what they can expect if they take a certain action.
And what you just mentioned off the statement of, separating Bitcoin from blockchain, law, what's the interest that you're getting from students? Like, does your class fill up like in 2 minutes?
It filled up so quickly that I tried to keep it as a seminar, right? And Adam came to my class, so he's met my students. That for the first time in years, I had students stopping me in the hallway saying, please, can I get into your class next semester? And so I basically said, show up on the first day and we'll see if anybody drops, right? And so of course I went over the number of students I wanted to have in the room. And I just couldn't say no was the problem. But
They need to give you a bigger room. I've been in that room.
I know. I need a bigger room.
700 seater.
Yeah.
Everybody can make it in.
There is a thirst for the knowledge about this, and not just with lawyers and not just with technologists, just ordinary people want to understand the news when they read about blockchain. And that's why the community education is going to be so important, because it's not fair to leave people out who want to know what it is. And so that's why I do think it could be an equalizer if we could find a way to train folks into, just a general understanding of what it is.
No, that's great. We're running up on time here, but I think this has been a great discussion. And just to kind of recap, and I'll let you guys kind of close it out on some last statements. But for the viewers out there, we just went over kind of the blueprint, really. And I think I changed the theme of this conversation from, perspectives, which is true, but to a blueprint of, what is blockchain, and everybody needs to understand it in their own right. And then really being educated about it. We just mentioned Bitcoin, blockchain, they're two different things, right? And then enterprise and startup world, and then governments, and everybody's perspectives on that front, on how to apply it, how to use it, the pros and cons, which eventually lead to adoption here. And we just talked about what is adoption, and it could come in different forms. And we're all kind of waiting, and we'll see what happens. But I think the underlying theme that we can all agree on is that blockchain is here, and that it's going to change, as Professor said at the beginning. What it was to her was change. So I'll leave you guys with one last statement before we close this out. I'll start with you, Andy, if you want to kind of finalize any thoughts or anything to the viewers right now. There's a lot of students that we're promoting this towards, our schools and all that, so you can take that note. Or I think we have a lot of middle of the pack kind of viewers checking this out. But what would you like to kind of conclude there?
Well, I so love that you've opened this up to students and Professor. It just warms my heart to hear that the students are seeking you out and wanting to be part of learning and part of this industry, because it's incredibly important, for their future, I believe. And, so for me, a lot of what, I've been involved in business a long time, venture, startups, and big enterprise in the industry. And I think today is the most, despite everything happening, this is the most exciting time in history if you are coming up and wanting to be part of a massive transformation. It's the first time in history that we have multiple technologies converging to really have the capability to transform our world. And a lot of what I'm involved in outside of the business world is impact. And now we've incorporated it into everything that we do. So, for the students that are out there, get involved in any way possible, seek and learn. I'm an ambassador for the X Prize as well as Singularity University. A lot of what we do is education and inspire. And so, programs like MouseBelt and what they're putting out there, Singularity, there's a lot of information. And a lot of what we'll be doing at Unity is public-private, education in ways that we can really scale the ability for entrepreneurs. And hopefully, Adam, will be working in partnership on a number of those initiatives. Seek and you'll find it. And, don't get bogged down by the bits and bytes, jump in. And, some of those impact initiatives, if I think of what can really transform society, from climate change, we're part of an initiative to bring grassroots carbon drawdown to the world. And blockchain is helping enable that. So if you have a vision, you're not quite sure how to make it work, just seek and learn and get involved in the community. You'll find the people that can help you.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think I have found this to be a really welcoming space, that people are eager to help. And when I've reached out with questions to folks at Ethereum or folks anywhere, really, including Adam, actually, who came on a whim, like I said, can you come to my class this week? And he was willing to come. I have found the people here to be really welcoming. And I think that it's a cool space in that way to develop a career in. The other thing I would say, if you're a student or a professor, go to your administration and tell them that there's a thirst. And I hope they'll find a way to make it happen. If not, get in touch with me and I'll call them and tell them what a success our blockchain class has been, because I think universities want to serve students where they are and want to serve students what they're interested in. And if they know that there's interest, they will make it happen. And so that's my hope. And again, folks are welcome to reach out to me, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to have folks reach out to try to help convince their university of the importance of this. And don't forget, May 22nd, the Blockchain Working Group is open for business. So come and tell us what you think we should write into the laws.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you both for joining me today. I think this was an awesome panel. I had a really good time. I hope you did too. And for everybody out there watching, appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you're enjoying Reimagine 2020, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Stay tuned to learn more about the state-of-the-art in blockchain education and technological development all around the world. Reimagine 2020.